After 141 years in publication, Foster's Daily Democrat, which is one of the oldest family-owned newspapers in this country, has been sold to New Media Investment Group. The sale was finalized Monday. Publishers and employees for the daily newspaper have always strived to keep the citizens of Dover and its surrounding communities informed about what is happening on a local and national level. The responsibility to provide the region with valuable information about the world around them was established by the company's founder, Joshua Foster, during his salutation address to the public in the first issue of Foster's Daily Democrat, published on June 18, 1873. There is nothing which can give so much life, pleasure, and real substantial good character to a place as a lively and well-conducted daily newspaper. We shall devote these columns mainly to the material and vital interest of Dover and vicinity. Whatever may tend to benefit this people and enhance their prosperity will receive our warm and enthusiastic support. Joshua L. Foster. In recent years, Foster's descendant, Patty Foster, has served as the president and publisher of the newspaper. Last week, Patty spoke on camera about the history of the company and her childhood with sister Kathy Hayward, who most recently served as the vice president of payroll.
I'm Patty Foster. I'm the publisher and president of George J. Foster and Company, which is number 2 generation, and I've worked my way up through being a switchboard operator, 10 years old, and carrying papers, and finally had a stint with coaching and teaching, and ended up back at the paper in Human Resources, and worked side by side with my dad, and eventually got the role of publisher when he passed.
I'm Kathy Hayward. I'm the oldest, and I started working here when I was about 13, and kept going from tear sheets to accounting, cashier, and now VP.
We definitely had a fiery editor in our gene pool named Joshua L. Foster, and he was writing at the States and Union in Portsmouth, and he was writing very fiery editorials against Lincoln's beliefs, and he was a states' rights Democrat, which means the southern states should be able to keep their rights, and there were other issues tied up with slavery, but certainly slavery was the priority of that argument. And so he was living in Portsmouth, which is the north, and living in a Navy town, and they didn't really appreciate his views about the Civil War. So when the Civil War ended, the shipyard had access to a lot of alcohol, and basically the mob got very drunken, and they went down to his place of business and went outside, and there was a point where there was a sheriff called in to control the mob outside his establishment, and they were calling for him to recant his beliefs about the Civil War, or they would tar and feather him. That was the threat of the mob, that they would literally tar and feather him. And so Joshua, being true to himself, had no thought of recanting his opinions, and was very stubborn, and the poor sheriff got caught in the middle of this, trying to keep the mob out and trying to get Joshua to take a backstage exit. Finally, some friends and the sheriff convinced Joshua to leave out the back way, and sure enough, the mob came in and ransacked his establishment and threw the type and all the equipment into the river down by the federal building. And Joshua was smart enough in those days to actually sue the federal government and got monies to start up, and never missed a publication. I guess he had it published in Concord, I believe. And in the meantime, people from Dover were interested in getting a newspaper in Dover, and invited him up to see if he wanted to start up here in Dover. He started a weekly, and within about 6 months, he started Foster's Daily Democrat as we know it in June 18th of 1873.
Foster also talked about her father, Robert, who passed away in 2009.
But he was so impressed by the soldiers of war. Even, you know, he was really impacted by his military service, and I think that whole generation was impacted by the military service, and so he had, they had won the war. What bigger endorsement could you have? So they were really full of confidence, and things like the GI Bill were making a difference throughout the whole country. So the country was really feeling invigorated, and of course females had been empowered because they played such a part in the war. So I think that was a really different environment to come back to, and very energizing. And I think the one thing that I remember about my dad is how enthusiastic he was about life. It really never subsided. It would run you over some days, but even on his last days, he was excited about what could be and the world around him. He was curious about everything, and that really played a role in how well he did.
Like if you went on a trip with my father, you'd say, "Where are we going?" And he would say, "Oh, we're going to Pennsylvania." And so you'd be thinking you were going in one direction, and all of a sudden you'd be like half an hour later, it's like, shouldn't we be there by now? And he had taken a detour to another newspaper, and of course you were stuck there, so you went in and got the whole tour of the newspaper, which he enjoyed. My mother was a saint for putting up with that. It didn't matter whether he was learning about how a barcode worked in a grocery store. He was genuinely curious and enthusiastic about learning anything new. So I think he'd be in the thick of it. I think he would be fascinated by the technology and say, like, we need to do that. We need to get there. We need to do that. So he was always rolling. He always reinvested in the company. There was no sailboats or, they had their fun for sure, but they were everything was about the business and the legacy and the heritage and the meaning of what the journalism could bring to the communities. I think he was just 110 all about that, and was having a ball doing it. He just loved every minute of it. And my mother, like I said, was a very patient and good partner, and wonderful balance for him. But we were immersed in newspapers. It wasn't a part-time job. It was dinner time. But we got to meet. I mean, Paul Newman came to Foster's, and all these, political mucky mucks would come into Foster's, including Vice President Bush came in, and you had the Secret Service scoping out City Hall and a rooftop.
It was in December, and my kids were little, and I remember bringing Greg in anyway with Dick. Dick, he was holding Greg, so he was even tiny, and it was a stormy December day, and it just, and we stayed in the front office, and I think Mom and Dad were upstairs, but we actually saw them. Of course, they came down, and they
visited with everybody.
And
yeah, those were the days where they'd come in and say hello to the whole staff. So we met, virtually anybody of any notoriety has come through our editorial boards. That's pretty significant. When you operate in New Hampshire, you have great access to political leaders. So we've been very blessed to know how that operates, and to have a more one-on-one approach with people, because you can have an assumption of a politician, and frankly, the editorial board allows them to show more, and they're all usually very bright people.
Foster explained the level of dedication her staff has had over the years. Many of them have worked for the newspaper for multiple decades. Seacoast Media Group, which is owned by New Media, has been printing Foster's Daily Democrat for the past year and a half from the Foster's building on Venture Drive in Dover and their Portsmouth facility on New Hampshire Avenue in Portsmouth. President and publisher of SMG, John Tabor, talked on Monday about his start in the newspaper industry and his love for the field of publishing.
So I grew up with a father who was in public service, and when I went off to college, I discovered working at the college newspaper and the wonderful excitement of a newspaper being able to put an idea or information into so many minds at once, and see what results from that. So I went right out of college into being a reporter, daily newspaper reporter in Pittsburgh, and then the Arizona Star in Tucson, and worked my way up, from night police beat to courts, and I've never learned another useful occupation than newspapers. The fun of knowing today what everybody's going to talk about tomorrow makes even a bad day at a newspaper better than a good day at a lot of other jobs. And the business has its challenges, and although newspapers are transforming into many things, news that we do, local news, will always be needed and be vital and even indispensable to help people live their lives. So I was part owner of a weekly paper in California and learned all of the management functions, and worked on the press, learned how to insert the papers, learned how to get the carriers to go out and sell subscriptions door to door, and then sold my interest in that, and started a newspaper in Portsmouth to compete with the Herald in 1987. And we had a great paper. It was feisty and aggressive, and it was an upstart paper. Won a lot of awards for investigative reporting, and gained a lot of advertisers, but not enough to beat the Herald. But it was a very good lesson that, to start a paper, have a wonderfully talented group of people. And competition in newspapers is great. Competition in all forms of media is great because the readers win. I think the citizens of Portsmouth were better informed because they had two media competing, and we broke a story about a lot of people in town who were fairly well known being on the board of a nursing home, and they had taken the assets of the nursing home and invested it in some of their private projects, and the nursing home went broke. We did a lot of investigative reporting on that resulted in a number of indictments, and the few remaining older residents of the nursing home were taken care of, and it was good reporting. But the big lesson was, I think that my business partner and I had thought we were very smart and knew we could do a better job in Portsmouth as the competing paper, but we didn't make it. And that taught me a lot of humility. And it also taught me that in a newspaper or in any organization, it's the talent of the staff more than any one or two individuals. It's the depth of the talent and how well they collaborate with one another. So I stayed with the company that backed us and went to be general manager of a newspaper in Pennsylvania for 3 years in the 90s, and then came back, and lo and behold, the Herald was up for sale. The Portsmouth Herald was up for sale. And I like to think we made the Herald so good that my owners had to buy it. And so we acquired the Herald in 1997 and created Seacoast Media Group. And then we subsequently acquired the York Weekly and the York County Co-Star in Kennybunk. And we built our printing division, and we launched our website and built our digital marketing services operation. So,
although it is an end of one era for Foster's Daily Democrat, it is the beginning of a new and exciting venture for the employees at both companies. Advertisers and readers will both benefit from the changes, Tabor said in a staff meeting on Monday. For Fosters.com, this is Kimberley Haas.